Hey there, welcome to today's live stream. If this is your first time stumbling upon my channel, my name is Austen Menges, and I've been a pro editor for over 20 years with a focus on broadcast TV commercials. And you'll find lots of editing content on my channel, especially content about editing for emotion and editing with story in mind. Hey, Keshav, nice to see you here. No need to apologize. I'm so glad you're here. And for anyone watching this or who wasn't able to come live, I always post these so you can watch the whole thing later. Keshav, would you mind chatting if you can see and hear me? I just want to make sure everybody can see and hear me with my audio and video coming through before I get started. That'd be really helpful. If you all like editing content, please download my free guide at the link below. A lot of people have really benefited from that. So go check that out at the links below. Thank you, Keshav. I really appreciate that. All right. I want to start diving right in while people come in. Please chat your name and where you're from, and of course, your questions. I think I'll be able to get to quite a few questions from the chat today. But yeah, let's dive in. I've had some really good questions lately on one of my favorite topics, which is emotion. So, Walter Murch, in his book In the Blink of an Eye, he put out 6 criteria for editing, and his top criteria is emotion. But he doesn't go into a lot of detail on what that means, except he does say you're editing for the emotion of the audience, not necessarily the characters in the scene, but what you want the audience to feel. So I've received some questions, and a lot of questions I get are really asking for a concrete way to do things. And for better or for worse, this is an art and a science. Editing is. So I wanted to say a couple things about emotion that have been on my mind lately. So the questions I'm getting are like, well, how do you target an emotion? I watched this and I don't feel that emotion, or I don't really understand what you mean. How am I targeting an emotion from the audience? And here are some things I want you to keep in mind. The key to coming up with a target emotion before you start your edit is so that you edit with intention. And that is going to change your editing over the long term. Now, if you dive into an edit and this is your first time picking a target emotion before you start editing, you might not see tangible results right away. But over time, it really is going to add up and you are going to see changes in your editing. And you could see changes right away. So you pick a target emotion. And one other common misconception is that emotion always means sadness or tearing up um, or being afraid, a negative connotation. Well, I added a lot of comedy. So the emotion I'm targeting a lot of times is excitement or joy or laughter. So that's another thing I wanted to bring up. But once you pick a target emotion and you're going for that emotion, one way to test it is by showing it to other people. But please keep this in mind. You're never going to get the response you want from 100% of the people. This isn't an exact science. The goal is to get the emotional response you're looking for um, from as many people as possible. For instance, one of the absolute best ways to um, test your target emotions is with a live audience. And now think for a minute about um, going to see you on a great movie in the theater with an audience. And when you go and see a great movie in a theater with an audience around you, you are feeling the same emotion as all those people around you. Think about a great Steven Spielberg film like um, Saving Private Ryan. The whole theater is filled with tension at certain scenes. So Spielberg set out to make us feel tense, and then they used every technique possible in the filming and the casting and the editing to make us feel that emotion. So we know that works. But there might be one person in the theater who just doesn't feel tense at that point. So the idea is pick a target emotion so that you're editing with intention and then show it to people and try to see if as many people as possible will are responding in the way you would like, but not everybody will. So I just want you guys to have that in mind. This is an art and a science, and but does work. So start editing with intention. And before you start your next edit, pick an emotional target for each section of your video and try to aim for that. Oh, and the other thing is it takes a while to realize what techniques you you use to elicit the type of target emotion you're going for. And that's a learning process. But you always want to start with that foundation of editing with intention. So I hope that clears up a little bit about what I mean when editing for emotion and some different things you should keep in mind. I might make a new video about it where I share some of those in depth. Let me share my screen because I have a few good questions about my timeline. So hopefully that came up. Looks like it's working. One other thing about emotion is there are a couple of emotions you don't want people to feel. And I think this deserves its own video, but we're always fighting. We don't want the audience to feel confused because that pulls you out of the story. We also don't want the audience to feel bored. So I think that might be its own video soon where I say, how do we avoid these types of emotions in the audience? Hey, Paranoid Android, thanks for joining. Oh, Keshav, I had the question I asked you about how in our class are. Oh, yes. Cut point with minimum blur. Okay, great. Great. Thank you for bringing that up, Keshav. Um, yes, I actually think hey, Mr. Giara, great to have you. Keshav, that's a great point. I think your professor is correct. So when you can, try to cut out on frames that are nice and sharp. I think that's a good overall statement that you can shoot for. And I'm not sure what edits you're talking about exactly, but I really do think you're probably right. I probably have some edits where there's some blurred frames. But all that means is I prioritized wanting to cut on that frame over cutting out on a perfectly um, in focus, non blurry frame. So, all of these little editing rules, you have to put them in context that there's exceptions to every rule, right? And then there's a hierarchy of rules. So, we talk a lot about continuity and how continuity is not the first editing criteria. So, this is sort of similar. Yes, I always want there to be continuity in my edits if I can make that happen. But if there's an emotional impact I have in mind and I have to use some shots in a way where I'm going to lose continuity, but I really want to cut here because I think that increases the emotional impact, or I really have to use this shot because it tells the story better, well, then I'm gonna let a continuity error stay in my cut because there's a hierarchy to all of these editing techniques. So when I'm going in and yeah, I think that's a really good point your professor made. So I'm not disagreeing with them. If everything's working with my top editing criteria, emotion, story, rhythm, sound, and action, yes, I'm going to try to cut on frames that aren't blurry because I want there to be kind of a visual crispness to my cuts. But I'm not going to put visual crispness between my cuts above emotion or story. So I hope that answers your question. Hello, George C. Thank you so much for joining. So you guys leave your questions down below, and I'm going to answer another question that came in from a subscriber. If you guys want to be a subscriber, if anybody watching likes editing content, download my free guide. You will then be on my email list and you'll get a cool free guide about editing that a lot of people have really enjoyed. It's helped a lot of people. And then you will get priority in these chats when you email me a question, and that could be cool. So think about that. But here's a question from an email subscriber. Austin, how do you navigate notes you don't like as an editor? I think we all can relate to that. Anybody who's collaborated, any editor who has had a collaborator, there are notes that come through to us that we don't like. Can you all relate? I think that's a pretty common theme in any creative industry, really. Anybody, if you're a graphic designer, if you're a cinematographer, it's a collaborative field. So we're always getting notes, and it's 100% chance you're not going to like every note. So he goes on to ask, well, how do you navigate notes you don't like? Do you try to push your ideas and your thoughts while still being respectful? Or is it always what the director or agency says that goes? Wonderful question. And this has a little bit of nuance to it. However, yeah, it's pretty frustrating, right? Keshav says yes, it's frustrating. Yeah, I think we can all agree. But here's how I deal with it. So I edit a lot of commercials, and there are a lot of people involved. Okay, I typically am working closely with the director of the commercial, but then there is the advertising agency, and they hired the director and myself. So they are our boss. But then they have a boss, the actual client who hired the ad agency. So if we are working on a beer commercial for an advertising agency, the advertising agency has a boss of the people internally at the beer company. So it might be the chief marketing officer, it might be their internal marketing executive. It could even be the CEO of the company. So there's a lot of layers of notes. So working in the commercial world has really given me a lot of experience working with feedback and trying to navigate that. And at the end of the day, the key is you have to, especially when you're being paid for your time, you have a boss and you are not really trying to make your vision come to life at that point. You are trying to make other people's vision come to life at that point. So that's kind of the hat I put on. I kind of try to set my ego aside and say, how best can I serve this project first and foremost? And then how best can I serve those people who have hired me? So when they ask something of me that is objectively wrong, like they're asking me to make a cut that doesn't actually make sense or it kind of breaks a rule of filmmaking, I just try to politely bring that up because that's part of my job to make sure everything looks and sounds professional. Um, and then if I will also present creative ideas, but I hold them loosely because while I want to present my ideas, and most good collaborators like it when you present an idea they haven't thought of before, um, I also understand that my idea might not get selected or somebody else's idea might be best. So, myself, and the director I'm collaborating with, we are getting notes from the ad agency who's getting notes from their client. So those come in and we always do their notes. We try not to get cynical or jaded, and we try to stay positive and create something great. Now, here are a couple of things you can do when you truly get into a situation where you believe the final product you made could be better because all these notes came in. So the thing that goes to broadcast was signed off on everybody. It was signed off on the ad agency and the client, and they chose that. And that's what they sent out on TV or on streaming platforms or on YouTube. There's a thing called a director's cut. It could also be called an editor's cut. So many times, the director they hired had a vision for the piece, even though they had a job, which was to fulfill the client's needs and the agency's needs. The director still brings a vision to a piece. So I will then work with just the director, and we will do a cut that brings his vision to life, and we will often call that a director's cut. That's what it's called. So we're going to work on a director's cut. And this is so he can put something on his demo reel that he is proud of and is a better reflection of what he had in mind for that commercial. Now, I am very aligned with the directors I work with. And so the director's cut is often what I also use because it's sort of this collaboration. Me and the director are kind of coming up with what we thought was the best possible um, product based on what we had and what the director's vision was. So it's a collaboration. That's what I usually use on my demo reel, not usually the broadcast cut. Now, there are times when I also have some issues with the director's cut, and I want to make my own cut, and that would truly be an editor's cut because I'm a creative and I want to put something on my reel that I believe in. So um, you do have to navigate this a little bit relationally because this can be very offensive depending on how you navigate it. But most people understand, like, hey, I'm going to make an editor's cut that doesn't have this shot in it. It kind of tightens up this section or whatever. And usually everybody's cool with that. The agency recognizes the director's going to have a director's cut. And I think a director might recognize also that an editor's going to have their own cut. And these cuts that you make that are separate or your own, you don't necessarily have to post them publicly. They could be a part of a custom demo reel, for instance, that you send out so other collaborators don't have to see them. But in conclusion, yes, we're always getting notes. One, stay objective and professional. Put your ego aside. Do what's asked of you because you're being paid. Second, always see if you can have that opportunity to make a director's cut if it didn't turn out the way you and the director wanted. And then third, think about making an editor's cut if you do want to make some final changes for something you want to put on your demo reel. So I hope that offers some insight onto how I deal with notes. So, George C., thanks for your question. Curious about the jungle slingshot footage. Why did you decide to include it? Was it because of world creation? So the world seems bigger, continuity imply growth from the character. Oh, great question. I love story questions. Hassan, thank you for coming. I have some of your questions here I'm going to get to soon. George, that's a great idea. We thought it was to make the world seem bigger. That's a really good insight because we shot Treasure Imagination it was a virtual production. So we were kind of hemmed in a little bit. So when we made one of the early rough cuts of Treasure Imagination, we didn't have that shot at the beginning, which is a stock shot of a city, and we didn't have the jungle shot. And I had the idea that we could expand the world a little more by including a wider view. So a wider view of the city at the beginning and then a wider view of the jungle. And then that was also a comedic moment because the kid, when he's saving the day and he's going to slingshot the bad guy, it flies so far he flings it so far it goes over the canopy. So not only do you get that cutout, which builds this bigger world, but it's kind of this comedic thing that he was so strong, he shot the slingshot um, way further than you would imagine in real life, and then hits the bad guy. So it's kind of a slight comedic moment. But yeah, it was a little bit of a challenge since that was all shot on a virtual production stage to put together what felt like a real chase scene. And I thought that was a cool idea. And the director Scott and I kind of collaborated on that once we had the idea to include a couple of bigger, wider scale shots. And I'm really happy with how that turned out. So Hassan, I'm glad you're here because I have some of your questions next. Hassan is a subscriber, and he had a lot of good questions about timeline, the Premiere timeline. So I think you can see how I'm sharing my screen here, and I'm going to give you a few of my best tips on how I deal with string outs and how I navigate my timeline. So, first of all, I'm in Premiere Pro, but I think most of these things could be utilized in other editing platforms like DaVinci. You'll just have to go in and see. You'll kind of have to go in and translate these ideas into your own editing software. But one thing I use, so I have everything in this string out. I have the whole film. This is Treasure Imagination string out. This is an hour and a half of stuff. So that's kind of a lot of stuff. But I have it in story order. And I always include a screenshot. Oh, thank you, George C. My pleasure. Keep the questions coming, everybody. Okay, and thank you all for being here. It's really fun to do these. You are all asking wonderful questions, and I'm really enjoying these live streams. I think this is the fourth one, so that's pretty fun. Okay, So first and foremost, I include a screenshot of every setup at the beginning of all the clips from that setup. So here's the setup. This is called 101B. I'm going to make this a little bigger for you all. And then I have all the 101B takes, and I can go edit by edit. But then you'll notice I have a marker. It's this orange marker. Okay. So every setup has a marker, like a little chapter marker. And then I have a hotkey where I can bounce between them. So, and I can go really fast. So I can quickly see every setup from the movie, can go even faster. Hopefully that's coming up. And so I can quickly navigate to any scene. So I highly recommend markers. Now you'll notice I have my marker window. So the orange markers are the only ones I have selected. And that's because the orange markers are my chapter markers. But I have other markers too. And so I could show just the green markers. And these are notes that I made in the timeline. So, and I can navigate with my same go to previous and next marker, and I can see the notes I've made. And then I have red markers, and these are notes the director made. So I'm able to I'm able to quickly jump from shot or scene to scene. And then I'm able to go through my notes. I'm able to go through the director's notes, all by switching on and off these individual markers and having hotkeys that will take me from one setup to the next. The other two main ways I like to do things, or sorry, I like to sort shots or remember different selects I liked or takes I liked, is with color coding. And, you know, typically, and I also like having that on a hotkey. I actually love when everything is the same color to start. So, for instance, now everything's blue, right? Okay. Now, say I'm watching through this scene and I say, oh, this takes great. I might quickly mark it by color coding it. So, if everything's one color, I quickly notice when I've adjusted a color. Okay. So, that's one way I can mark something. The other way you'll notice, like I did here, is dragging things up to another higher video track. And this is very common. I think a lot of editors will kind of create a visual hierarchy of their selects. So I probably liked this take more, or I liked this take more than the video track one takes, but then I liked probably these two takes the most. So maybe I wanted to cut those in. Okay. David V, thank you. Thank you for coming. I will answer your question soon. Okay, now I'm gonna show you the timeline of one of the timelines of Treasure Imagination with all my sound design. So this is a lot of sounds. So there's a lot to manage, right? Um, One of the key things with sound design is this idea of checkerboarding. So you'll see it a couple places right here. So I have some sounds here, some dialogue, and then some sounds here. So when you have overlapping sounds, you want to give them their own space so that you can mix them and add your crossfades and just have some room to adjust different types of dialogue on different tracks. So this is probably the boy making a vocalization, and then this is probably the mom's vocals or the mom's voice. Hey, Nicholas, thanks for joining. Oh, from Malaysia. I love the global nature of us getting together. So I appreciate you all being here. Yeah, and then you'll notice I also kept all the microphone options, which is not always necessary, but we had probably a boom mic on set, and then the characters each had their own lavalier mics, lapel mics, and then there's probably a mix on the top track. So I kept all the microphones and then I checkerboarded the audio because you really want to be super organized with your audio, especially if you're going to deliver to a sound mixer later. So you would deliver your AAF file to a sound mixer, and the AAF can actually keep track of all of the levels you've set so far. And then it brings up everything in Pro Tools in the same way you had it organized in your timeline. So you want your sound to be super organized. So I recommend checkerboarding your audio, and then also have a a rational way to organize everything. So I like dialogue up here, then we get into some specific sound effects, and then we have the music down here, which is music stems. Um, so that's kind of how I have this set up. And yeah, I recommend just having some logical patterns to how you organize stuff, especially if you're going to collaborate. It becomes so key when you start collaborating, your organization levels. Another thing I really highly recommend, and look, everybody does things differently, right? So a lot of my advice is simply how I do things. And everybody's brain, especially editors, we're all very unique in how our brains want to organize things. So I am not pushing this on you. I know some incredible editors whose timelines look like a mess, especially their video tracks. They'll just have like a mountain of video tracks with all these different options and things happening. And they get a sense of the rhythm by watching the program monitor, by watching the output. But for those of you who are more like me and you like a streamlined look and feel, I do recommend, or if you're new and you're starting to figure out what you like and what works for you, I do recommend trying to edit on one video track. And part of the reason I love it so much is because you can see the rhythm that you're building. If you can see the cuts, you can see the shot length so easy. Like I can easily see, and hopefully this comes through on the screen share. Can you see how long this shot is? And then when the fight scene starts, how fast my cuts get. That's really cool to see while you're going. Then you see another point of rhythmic contrast over here when the boy kneels down to grab the idol. I personally love cutting on one video track for this reason, and I do recommend you trying it out. And then if you have different takes you want to try, I simply stack them up above the V1 track. So my timeline won't always look perfect like this. This is sort of the end of the project when I was delivering for sound. But let's say on this shot, I actually had 3 shots or 3 takes of the boy picking up the hat and putting it on. I would probably just stack them up over this shot. So I'd have these options I could enable and disable to check. So those are some ideas on selects and string outs. Another point, okay, so Hassan said a detailed explanation of how to effectively create selects and string outs from footage. Yeah, so once you have your string out organized and you've identified the selects you like, then you're putting them together in a rough cut. And one thing I would recommend is you really do have to try a lot of takes within the context of the edit. It's incredible, and maybe you've experienced this as well. I find it really interesting that a take of a performance, for instance, can seem great, can seem perfect when you watch it by itself. But then when you put it in the context of your story, your rough cut, it doesn't quite work. So always try the selects that you like best in the actual cut and pick ones that work in the context of the cut. And so everything works together. It's like an amazing puzzle. That's partly why I love editing so much because there's so many things that you have to put together and figure out to create this story. It's very much like movie magic. So those are some little thoughts on that. Um, yeah, and then let's see, refining a rough cut. Well, I would recommend. Here's one of my best tips on refining a rough cut. You refine it until you get to a point where you like it and you do the whole thing. Now, if you're doing a really long project, this may not work as well, but I'll just ask this. Do you ever get into an issue as an editor where you just re-edit the first 4 shots for like way too long before you move on to the next bit? That I struggle with that a lot. And so then, like, eventually by the end of the day, like, the first little part of my edit is pretty polished, but I haven't even finished putting together the rest. What I like to do instead is I think in chunks and I try not to go backwards until I've put together whatever I've decided is sort of the finished part I'm working on. So, for instance, if it's a 30-second spot, I'll try to keep moving forward until I get a whole picture or a whole version of that 30-second spot. And that's rough cut one or whatever I name it. Um, okay, so then that exists, right? Then I duplicate my sequence, which I hope this is a practice you've brought into your editing. If you haven't, I highly recommend always be duplicating your sequence. Make a new sequence because you want to save your new version whenever you have a new idea. You want to be able to go back quickly. So you finish from start to finish. From start to finish, whatever you decided was what you were going to finish, and then you make a new sequence, and then you refine from start to finish. Okay, and that's what I recommend. And I recommend going through many, many iterations where you're refining from start to finish. And you're also refining the sound design from start to finish. So, kind of every time you take a full pass, everything's getting a little better. Bonus points, this is a huge part of my process. Bonus points if between those passes, you got feedback from somebody. That's going to be really key. And when you make a first rough cut, it's very vulnerable to get feedback. But if you have some trusted collaborators, it can really work. So, one main tip that I'm trying to use myself is try to put a first rough together of your entire thing, call it done, get some feedback, and then come back and refine from the beginning. Now you have another thing. Make a copy, maybe get feedback again, refine a whole nother pass. And I think this way of editing, just getting comfortable with iteration, iterative change, getting a little better with each cut. This is how you're going to get to the next level. Instead of trying to really slave over, put all your energy into that first rough cut, no, think of it more as a process. And by the time you get to the fifth, sixth cut, everything's starting to really pop, and all the little changes you've made have a cumulative effect. So get comfortable with that process. Let it become part of what you do. So let me check in with everyone. So George C, yo, you're welcome for answering. My pleasure. David V, let me see what you have here. Have you given any thought to using AI? I've been uploading short videos to ChatGPT to get feedback. Oh, feedback on my editing. That is super interesting. I have been using AI for in a lot of different ways. That is one way I have not thought to do that. I did not know you could get feedback on your editing from ChatGPT, but I think that's a great way to use ChatGPT. Some of the ways I use I think we all use auto transcripts probably in. Oh yeah. Hey, MMWOSU live stream Wednesdays. Woohoo! And Vid Tools. Oh, from Finland. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Glad to have you all here. One way we are using AI is we create transcripts in seconds in Premiere Pro. I'm creating captions within seconds. I have also experimented with using some initial AI editing when I do a podcast with like my friend Scott Rice, who's on the channel a lot. So we record in software that's called Riverside, and I can just have it do like a rough cut basically, and I think that's pretty cool. Now, here's the thing. I think I could make it better as a human. I think you all could too, as awesome editors. But here's the thing, and this we're going to run up against this with clients as well for any of you who edit for clients. They're going to start using AI to take away a lot of the tedious technical stuff, which I think is great because that'll open us up to come in and be more creative. And they're also going to be okay with an AI edited podcast if they had no budget. Like me, I don't have a budget for my YouTube videos, obviously. So am I going to spend a few hours trying to craft a perfect YouTube podcast edit? I may not have that time. But if AI can go through, recognize the audio, and make cuts kind of just little cuts back to the two shot of us and then singles based on when our audio's coming up. I think that gives us a good head start. So, in my opinion, I think we should be embracing AI as editors and actually use the tools, be the masters of the tools to help our clients. And I think because they're always going to need storytellers. They're going to need AI can't edit for emotion. AI can't really edit for story. So I think we are safe if we're focusing on the right editing criteria, which is what I teach on my channel and in my course. Um, but I do think AI is great. You know, another thing AI is great for is to write emails. As an editor, we have to write a lot of emails. We might be writing to our clients, you might be writing to collaborators, and there are some really powerful AI tools for writing that saves me a ton of time. In particular, I don't know if any of you have used Claude, but the Claude LLM model is especially good at writing. So if there's parts of your editing process, or if you can save time in other areas using AI, like writing emails, for instance, then you can have more time to focus on your editing. So, David V, I'm all for AI. I might do some more videos on that. Nicholas, yes, hello. George C. Okay, he has another thought on treasure imagination. The boy runs from left to right away from the bad guys, but in my subconscious, wonder where is he running towards? I feel like I need a POV of his desire. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I get it, George. Um, Obviously, we didn't do that, but I think that's a great opinion, a great idea. And when we have thoughts like that, when we come up and when we're working through a rough cut, those are the types of thoughts we try to address. And we come to a final conclusion that is our best effort to make something that we think works. And that's where we landed. But great thought. And then George also says it happens to me. I think he's talking about when we just end up editing like the first four shots of a project over and over and over. And at the end of the day, the first four shots are like looking really great, but then we haven't even finished the rest of the edit. So I'm glad you guys can relate to that. Vid Tools gives an answer, Control D with Media Composer. Okay, cool. Excellent. So you're in Avid Vid Tools. That's really cool. Okay, Adersh S. All he says, I always make a copy of the sequence after each draft and feedback. I use Version Raptor plugin to make a copy of the sequence to make the changes. Oh, that's really smart. Yes, clients can go back on their feedback. That's absolutely true. That happens a surprising amount of time. When you because this is an iterative, collaborative process, and this is true too when I give feedback to students in my course. A lot of my feedback, some of it is concrete, like I am positive this will make your edit better. You should do this. But a lot of what I give are ideas. And this is what I love about the creative process is I typically say in my notes, "Hey, I had this idea, you should try this." And I think a lot of clients, if they phrased it like that, it would be helpful. But like, how about this idea? Can you try it? So it's a little more flexible than saying this is a hard and fast rule, hard and fast piece of feedback. And that's why, because then when you do try their note, they're like, oh, thanks for trying that, but I don't like it. And I think that causes a lot of the going back um, on their feedback. But yes, version, get very comfortable making tons and tons of versions and trying to stay organized in that way. One tip for you, and you guys might have your own way of doing this, but I just simply give every sequence its own unique number at the end. So when I first start, it's probably the date, like 2020, 2025 0604 underscore project name. And then at the end, underscore 01. So that's sequence one. I never call anything sequence one again. I duplicate it and I just go in numerical order: 02, 03, 04, 05. And it doesn't matter. They don't have to be exact. I don't just rename it when I've created a full cut. I also just make a new sequence and add the new number at the end, even when I'm just making a big change that I wanted to make or I'm finishing something up. Um, so then I might end up with like 100 sequences. But the key with this and the benefit of this is when you upload to Frame.io for feedback, you know what cut. You can always reference the sequence number because I don't know if you might have come or ran across this when you're editing with collaborators, but if you just give something a random name like rough cut V1 from Tuesday, it can be harder to go, and then you didn't name your sequence that, it's really hard to figure out what cut they're talking about. But now I can always say, "Oh, cut 22, click on sequence 22," and I'm there instantly. So I highly recommend having a code, if you will, for your sequences compared to what you post for people to watch. Okay, let's see. Anchor, great to see you again. Talking about cutting visuals, how long and how short. I watched that video which you make about cutting on beats. Oh yeah, tell about cutting visuals, how long and how short. Yes, this is a great question. So that video is I think it's called Edit Like a Drummer, and I wanted to give an exercise so that people could start to feel a rhythm. So it's up to you. These are all very subjective. This is where our instinct and our intuition as editors come in. It's up to you to choose how long a shot is. But I will say this. Once you choose how long the first shot in the sequence is, that is establishing a shot length. So the next shots after that, if you want to have a constant, steady tempo, you want the shots after it to be around the same length. Now, we're not always editing to a music beat, although I think that was a really fun exercise. Sometimes we are just using our gut. And then also, obviously, the content of the shot will tell us where to cut as well because a shot has to be a certain length if you need a certain thing happening in the shot to be a certain length. But it's interesting when you pick that shot length for the first shot in your sequence or scene, the shots after that can you can decide if it kind of matches or if it doesn't match. And this is all about intention, right? So one thing I like to do that I think is one of the key ways to elicit an emotion you're going for is something called rhythmic contrast, where you develop one tempo and then that tempo changes. So I showed earlier in this cut, you can see, look, and it's not perfect, right? But these three shots are kind of similar in length. I'm going to make this a little bigger. Is that helpful? Actually, now it's hard to see where the cuts are, but these three shots are kind of the same length. This is shorter. Here's a nice long shot. So this kind of has a tempo, right? A little bit. It's not perfect. It's not like I'm um, cutting on the beat of a song, which also has a great effect. But then look how the tempo changes. Look how the rhythm changes when we get to the chasing. These shots are these shots are four times as long as these shots, and I kind of stay in this shorter cutting pattern until I get out of it much later. So think about rhythm in that way. And then you have so I would call there's kind of interchangeable words. I would call rhythm what I'm referring to, this is kind of like a tempo, and the way to measure this would be cuts per minute. That would be a way to talk about how fast you're cutting. And then you can also talk about the rhythm of scenes from one scene to another and how they feel. A long, lingering scene, and then maybe a fast action scene. There's lots of ways to discuss rhythm, but those are some ideas. And again, the editing rhythm exercise I gave, I just want I think it's a good way for people it's a good thing for people to do so they can start feeling what it's like to cut at these different rhythms. And doing it with music is so fun because you have a beat that you can cut to and then adjust your edits later. And then you can change the tempo. And then I think in that video, you can cut to the rhythm of the music and then mute the music and then see how it feels. See, did that improve your edit by cutting to the rhythm of that song, even if you take the song out? So those are some ideas on how to think about rhythm. I appreciate that question a lot. So Ed Dersh, thank you for joining. Yes, give a title for the sequence and add VO1, VO2, and so on. Okay, usually where I work, it won't go long. So meaning you might just be done at VO2 or VO3 or VO4. That makes sense. Yeah, whatever works for you. And I think as long as every sequence has a specific code, that would be really cool. So I wanted to share one thing that I'm not sponsored, and this is not um, it's not a sponsored video, and I actually don't have this to show you on my web app. But I did want to shout out. I'm trying this software called Looper, Louper. I don't know if any of you do remote editing sessions, but that can always be challenging when you're dealing with Zoom and Frame.io. But I did a test with this Looper software, and I think I'm going to use it for my next remote session. So it basically broadcasts my Premiere timeline in perfect sync into software where there's a Zoom like video call going on. So my collaborator can join in. They can see either I can set it so I could show them my program, which is everything just coming out of my program monitor, which is very cool. Or I can show them my whole Premiere workspace, or I can let it cut between them. And then I could also talk to them as if we're on a video call. They can chat, they can leave notes. It was very, very cool. So I think I might make a video where I'm demoing that because it's really worked well when I first tried it. And you can try it for free, which was really cool. And then I think I've shared already that Artlist has a really cool library plugin now for Premiere Pro, if you're a Premiere Pro user, and where you can drag things into the timeline. So that's pretty fun. So if you guys have any more questions, throw them in the chat. And I was going to see if I can have more to say about this huge string out here. Um, one thing to always include in your string out is don't just think about video, think about audio. So I have whole sections with wild lines. So I have a video coming up. I think I'm going to post it Saturday where I talk to Scott Rice about sound design, creative sound design, and we talk about the process of building a sound design from scratch. And one of the keys to start with is whatever the director recorded on set. So if a director is going to the trouble of recording extra lines on set, definitely take care in organizing them and getting them all into your string out just as you would any of the visual takes. And a good director they'll record wild lines. Like, say there was a big crash sound during the best audio performance of an actor's line. You might record a quick wild line to make sure the editor has what they need. They might have to replace it and sync it up. So basically, like a redo, like here's an extra wild line. Now, they might also do wild lines to capture different performance options. And this is something I love, especially off screen lines. But you'd be surprised how an actor giving a whole different performance will sync up very well with the visual performance take. But then a director will also get certain important sound effects. And so I think at the end here, I have all these extra sounds of different grunts, different mouth noises, different footsteps that were all recorded on set. So they took the time to have the actors in the space and get sounds that would be kind of maybe hard to replicate. And we used a ton of these in the movie, especially vocalizations from the actors. That ends up adding a real life to the performance. When the kid grunts, or when the kid's upset, or when the bad guy uh, makes kind of a growl sound, stuff like that. So you can see I have all these sounds at the end of my string out here. This is bringing back good memories. Let's see if I can tell you any more sound tricks before we wrap up. Any more questions? Um, this is really fun, just seeing all the stems from the musical score. I think I'm going to talk a little bit about this soon in another video, but when you do have the opportunity to work with a composer, one of the most incredible parts of it, Besides, you have a composer thinking through your edit and making it incredible by hitting all the right emotional points and really making all the transitions work seamlessly. Is they will deliver stems usually. And what you can do with stems is bring things in and out and change levels of certain groups of instruments. So I think it's super interesting to look. We have the full mix from the composer, but then we have all the brass, all the choir, the harps, the percussion, another percussion track, strings, synths. And what you can do with that is in the mix, you can kind of highlight certain instruments to increase emotion even more. So brass, for instance, has a whole certain feel. And what's cool about that is you can highlight that um, in your final mix. So that's pretty fun. And let's see, there was one other last thing I wanted to talk about. Oh, having options. So when you're organizing, especially for a final sound mix, another great thing you can do is give multiple options for certain sounds. So you can see, obviously, these are all stacked on top of each other, this little section here. These are probably different mouth sounds or fighting sounds. And instead of just putting in one option, I put in a bunch of options. So when the director's in the sound mix or the sound mixer is looking at or listening to the mix, they don't just have the one option, they have all these options. And usually this is kind of a lot here. Um, but maybe you would have one or two or three um, options in this cut. Okay, so that's the last of the questions. I did want to shout out my editing course. If you have been interested in the editing course, this is a great week to check it out because I just launched a business mini course as part of my course. So you get the whole course, the core version, where you actually get to edit a scene from Treasure Imagination, which is the footage I've been showing you here. You get another project, which is a visual essay. You get personal editing feedback from me on both, and you get to join an exclusive community. But this week, you get all the business stuff for free, which I'm going to charge more for later. And it's basically a blueprint to building an editing career you love. So if you've been on the fence about it, you have till Friday to get this new business part for free. So I did want to shout that out. No pressure, of course. There's plenty of free content that you can get. I'm going to do some more live breakdowns soon as well. Um, and I have a lot of fun videos planned. But keep your questions coming. These are super fun. And as far as I know, I'll be back next Wednesday for another live stream. And Anchor asked for a live breakdown. Oh, yes, I was going to say Treasure Imagination is how I teach all the concepts in my course. So I do a live breakdown in like a big video on sound design within the course. And then George C, how do you know when to have a straight cut or a transition between shots? That's a great question, George. We'd have to take a step back and ask, what emotion are you trying to elicit? And what's the best tool to capture that? I'm a huge fan of straight cuts. I mostly use straight cuts, but I think a well-placed dissolve has a wonderful, wonderful effect when done properly. But we're going to end a little bit early today. Please keep your questions coming. I really enjoy doing these live streams. It's been an incredible experience on YouTube because of all the kind people I've met and all the great encouraging support I've gotten. So thank you all so much for being in the chat, asking such great questions. I really feel like you all are a community. We're building this community of serious editors, and that really makes me happy. We're not just wanting to focus on the technical side, we're wanting to edit for emotion and tell stories and use all these tell techniques to craft stories that move people and create meaningful work. So that's all for today. But many, many thanks, Keshav, David, George, Anchor, Adersh, MMWOSU. Obviously, you leave great comments so often. Thank you all for watching. There will be a new video on Saturday. It's on creative sound ideas for commercials. I think you are going to really enjoy it. So that'll be out in a couple days. And thank you guys so much. And I will see you next week. Happy editing.